Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to our conversation for change with the amazing and incredible Renee Cummings. Renee, thank you so much for joining us today because I know for the last couple of days you have not been doing well. You've been going back to back sessions and all of that. And because of your commitment to this masterclass today, you're here, but I know you're a little under the weather. But thank you so much for joining us. How are you this
I'm
morning?
great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course, anytime. So I want to first of all welcome those of us who are with us in Zoom with Anya right now. What we're going to do before we start the masterclass is really get to know our masterclass facilitator. We want to get to know Renee Cummings, the expert, learn more about why she's doing what she's doing, what drives her, and why she thinks this work is so important, and then what you can expect later on today in the masterclass. And for those of you joining us in this open live part on YouTube and Facebook, you are getting a little snapshot, a little insight into what we do behind the scenes in our master classes. So we're sharing a little bit of it with you here today, just about half an hour, if you plug in with us. And this masterclass that we're doing today on AI ethics is part of our Future Law Next Generation Professional Practice series, which is designed for future oriented professionals like yourselves. Because if you're plugging in, that's who you are. You're thinking about how you can leverage your expertise to create change within your company, within your community, within your country, or even if you have international objectives and you can see that trajectory. We are here to help you in some of the most emergent areas of law, policy, innovation, and practice, new ways of being and doing to help you, equip you to negotiate the new normal. That's what we see. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And today's topic, as you can see across the screen, we're doing a little pretty thing in StreamYard, but I need to turn off my WhatsApp, guys, because it keeps coming in on my computer and it's disturbing me. So message after message after message. Sorry. Yeah, so today's topic is AI and ethics. A topic that I actually think is, and I think many of us are seeing that, one of the most pressing issues facing us in this information age that we are well underway and in the swing. And today we have with us Renee Cummings, who is has been described as a trailblazer. She's an incredible professional from the Caribbean. Renee and I go way back. And she has spent over 3 decades establishing herself, not only as a communications and crisis communication specialist in the Caribbean, but as a forensic criminologist, as a criminal psychologist, and doing incredible work for about 20, 30 years in the Caribbean and in the US. And she's now based in the US. And, I just want to kick off the conversation this morning with you, Renee. You've done so much already in other fields and really distinguished yourself in other fields. What made you make this transition now to being a data activist in residence at the University of Virginia and really being a voice on this issue of AI ethics?
Margaret, thank you so much. And I think it's about 15 years of working in policing and law enforcement and really trying to bring a best practice approach to law enforcement that led me to AI. Much of what I was lecturing on was big data policing, intelligence-led policing, evidence-based policing, data-driven policing. And much of that is driven by algorithms. And I became fascinated by the use of algorithms and predictive analytics that were being used in predictive policing. And that correlation between algorithms and accountability and transparency in policing to build public trust and public confidence and police legitimacy were areas of great concern to me. But what I was realizing is that instead of us using these algorithms to really build public trust in policing, what we were doing with the algorithms would be undermining public trust, because so much of the data sets that we were using in the United States, historical data that had baked into them bias and discrimination and systemic racism, were the same data sets that we were using. So, what was happening would be criminogenic factors, socioeconomic factors, were being used as data points for risk. So, these proxies for race and racial discrimination and systemic discrimination were slipping into our models that we were building these algorithmic decision making systems on. So it was a natural progression for a criminologist in 2021 to become an AI criminologist, as well as so much of what was being created in the space of algorithms and algorithmic policing and risk assessment tools that were being used in sentencing by judges, and risk assessment tools that were being used in corrections
Right.
to advance parole, were being designed by data scientists, often without the input of a criminologist. And I felt that criminology had to be the conscience of AI. And
Mm,
that just naturally, again, saw me moving into data activism, because so much of policing is data and so much of crime data is crap. And a lot of people, take crime data to be law, and they don't understand that crime data is some of the most bogus data there is out there. So the reality is we need to get behind that data. We need to disrupt that data. And some of the things that I was seeing with AI when it came to mass surveillance technologies, when it came to things like facial recognition, when it came to the ways in which algorithmic force is now being deployed against individuals, and the ways in which algorithms are being used to are being weaponized against communities of color. I felt as a criminologist I had to do what was right, which was to ensure that protection stayed in place for like civil liberties and human rights, and there needed to be some measure of heavy pushback against some of these tools that were being designed. So I think it all
mm.
became a natural progression, and I think I am savagely curious when it comes to information. So I say, I'm an
Always
eternal
have been.
student, yes, and I'm always intellectually curious. So all of it came together to create where I am now.
I think we're sticking a little bit. So AI criminology seems to be, I've never heard it described that way. Are you at the forefront of redefining or defining that field
I
of
think I
AI
am.
criminology?
I think I am, because I have given voice to it. So now we're seeing more and more criminologists starting to think about it. We're realizing that there needs to be an ethical approach to the ways in which algorithms are being used in the criminal justice system. There needs to be a requisite amount of education for individuals in the criminal justice system to use these tools, because what we have seen with these tools would be, again, Black and brown defendants in the US criminal justice system disproportionately getting sentences, as opposed to white defendants, or just in the ways in which the technology is being used, and not only in criminal justice, because much of the work that I do in AI ethics is across the board. So in criminal justice, in healthcare, in hiring, in finance, in credit, in real estate, in just about every domain in which algorithms are now being deployed, because of those historic data sets that remain biased. What we are seeing would be the undermining of progress in these communities. So the impact of data in society, and the impact of data on our institutions, and the ways in which data is now challenging concepts such as privacy, are all areas that were of keen interest to me. And again, all areas that fall within the realm of criminal justice, and public health, and epidemiological criminology, and all those great areas where I find myself. So it was just a natural fit.
I love it. All sounds so sexy. So tell me, you founded Urban AI a couple years ago, I think. Tell us a little bit about why did you found Urban AI? I mean, you've shared a little bit before, but what is Urban AI here to do? Who are you serving? Who are your clients? And What are you doing? Yeah.
So, urban AI is really to look at the deployment of AI within the urban context. Because, again, in the US, much of the deployment of AI within a law enforcement context is being done in vulnerable, underserved, high needs, marginalized communities, minoritized communities. And there needed to be some education on the community level to build the requisite levels of community efficacy against this technology and community resilience, as well as law enforcement needed to be checked. So there needed to be a certain measure of public education and public engagement on the technology, as well as urban AI looks at the ways in which we could use AI to advance our communities, the ways in which we can use AI within the context of therapeutic jurisprudence, the ways in which we could use AI to facilitate a more seamless rehabilitation process, or to more create a more seamless re-entry process for citizens leaving the carceral state and returning to their communities. So it's a way to create the technology that works within the criminal justice system, and the technology that protects and builds and enhances the communities, as well as to educate the communities on the technology.
Right. And so your focus really is about integrating or bringing into the AI space issues relating to racial justice, social justice, and design justice, and in that respect. And but when we think about I know a couple of weeks ago, and Elon Musk has been doing this for years, but a couple of weeks ago, in a recent forum, he actually said that AI is the existential threat facing us. And I know you are on the ground dealing with it in a racial justice perspective, which is where the rubber is hitting the road right now. They saying, they come first for your enemy, and, you don't care, or you're happy, or you're supporting it. Then they come for somebody you don't know, and you're indifferent. And then it hits home with your family, and all that. And I think what Elon Musk is saying is that we're not seeing that AI is one of the most, if not the most existential threat to humanity right now. And the way he described it, he said, I thought this was a really good analogy he drew. He said, when we are building roads as humans on this planet, we don't care how many ants we destroy along the way, right? Um, we just do it because we have a purpose. And he says AI is exactly like that. And when AI's purpose conflicts with humanity and humans' life, then just like the ants, AI is just going to go forward and do it. And he's been talking a lot about this up to recent times. This is broader than what you're focusing on, but what do you think about what Elon Musk is saying? That's a
Well,
future threat of AI.
Well,
You're
it's not a
dealing with a
future
current
threat,
threat,
it's the threat that's happening now. And that's the work
right?
that I do. Remember, I work as an AI ethicist and a data
Right,
activist. So, as an AI ethicist, that's exactly the work that I'm doing right now. And AI ethics is a movement. And I'm grateful that I am at the front of that movement. And that's already happened. So, that's not something that's going to happen. And that's why AI ethics is so popular
you're
now.
saying
And
it
it
has already happened,
of course,
that
it has already happened.
AI,
Hence the reason we are dealing with the fallout of algorithms, and we're trying to course correct. What happened is that the criminal justice system was one of the first places
yeah,
that we started to see the impact of algorithms, because we were
absolutely,
seeing it in the defendants that were being seen as a risk as opposed to no risk. So we started to
yeah,
see it in real time, and we started to see it in policing and in sentencing and in corrections, where you had individuals who were ready for parole and could not get parole because it was an algorithm in the risk assessment tool that was being used at the parole hearing that was denying that individual the right to freedom. So
my
that
God,
individual had to take the vendor of the risk assessment tool to court. And the challenge is, because an algorithm is considered an intellectual property or trade secret or proprietary right, you were not being able to go into the black box and see that algorithm. And a basic and fundamental tenet of the criminal justice system is the ability to face your accuser. But when that accuser was an algorithm, what was that individual going to do? So it's already happening, and it brings the questions to accountability, transparency, explainability. And these are the things we're discussing right now within the context of what Mr. Musk has said, because these are the challenges we are seeing across industries. And it comes back to one thing, an algorithm, which is a computational formula. But it's not only that, it is a legacy. And it is designed with these data sets that are historically biased. So, what we are seeing is that we are creating future technology with old data sets and replicating all these old prejudices and biases through new technology. So, what AI is doing is really fortifying the status quo, if
Yeah,
not destroying groups who just don't have the resources and the access and the opportunities. And the more we create it, the more we are dividing, creating that digital divide is getting wider. And you're seeing the less and less people being able to access certain opportunities. So it's happening right now. And that is exactly what I do as an AI ethicist, building that kind of ethical knowledge and ethical vigilance and ethical resilience, because most people aren't paying attention to
that's
what's
right.
going on with their data. But each of us has already had a data profile created about us, which we don't know what it looks like, but it's being monetized and it's also being weaponized against us, because most of us use data in the form of entertainment. We go on our phones, we click, we like, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, not understanding what those clicks, shares, likes, and tags are doing, who's using it, what is it being used to do, and when will it turn up in some sort of profile that is going to probably, frighten us. But it's happening right now. Most people think that AI is coming, but AI has been here for quite some time. It's just now that people are starting to become conscious of it.
Yeah, and it's touching certain communities, the most vulnerable communities right now. And I think Elon is saying that here, what? Yeah, it's touching the vulnerable communities right now, but within the next 5 years, is one of the things he says. It's really going to be destroying
Yes, but he's
everyone.
investing in that,
Yeah,
destroying in very real
agreed,
ways. And
agreed.
now, when you're looking at the forms of neurotechnology that they're trying to use to really now sort of like censor, the sensors that look at our mind and the things that we're doing. So we saw that Facebook recently launched this piece of technology. I think it's a wristband that, you don't even have to think about what you want to do on Facebook. Your brain sensors are sending it to that wristband, and that wristband is doing things for you. So now we're looking at that whole concept of neuroethics and how we've got to
Yes,
protect that as well. So
yeah.
it's all happening.
Yeah, this Neuralink. And he advocates for more regulation of the algorithms. Do you also advocate for better or more effective regulation of
Well,
algorithmic?
at the moment, in the US, the regulation is very limited. In the UK and France and Australia, it's definitely more robust. But the challenge is when it comes to regulation is that big tech companies are often more powerful than many countries. There are countries in this world that do not have the power of a Facebook. The other challenge you are seeing is many of these big tech companies are leading digital transformation in many nations. So they're providing not only the infrastructure and the hardware, but the software. So they're everywhere in these organizations. So that relationship between governments and tech companies make it pretty difficult for there to be any kind of stringent regulation, as well as this concept that ethics and innovation can't exist in the same space. So the challenge right now is that everyone knows we need regulations, but we just can't decide on what those regulations are going to be. And the regulators, the ones who are advising the governments, are the big tech companies. So it's a incestuous type of relationship that is creating many challenges for the industry.
Which is why we need a whole new type of policy entrepreneurship from the bottom up, where professionals like yourself can really advocate for the kinds of policies that we need to put in place. The experts can really advocate for that so that we can regulate this more effectively. Because what is the alternative? Is there an alternative to regulation and getting more effective regulation? I don't think that there is.
No, there's not. There's not.
I see Sabia is asking, why are we citing Elon Musk? Right? I cited Elon Musk because he's out there in popular culture. He's one of the people investing some incredible, massive sums into AI. And he is at the forefront of AI knowledge systems that are being created. And so, therefore, to me, he has some insight. I'm not a fan. I'm not saying I'm a fan. I'm just saying he has some insight into what's happening in AI. And he is advocating for caution. He's saying, yes, we're investing because there's a lot of good that can come from AI. Wouldn't you say, Renee? I mean,
Well,
using
not a lot
AI
of
for
good. There's
health.
extraordinary good. Right now, it's
Yeah,
because of AI we are using these systems. It is because of AI. After the pandemic hit, we were still able to be in contact. AI
that's
is
right.
doing extraordinary work when it comes to telecommunications, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to media and communications, when it comes to every aspect of what we do, from retail to finance to the ways in which we're now able to digitize our
Yeah,
libraries and our museums. And recently, drones were able to go to the Great Wall of China and find all the cracks in the wall, so architects would be able to, refurbish those walls. So AI is happening. It's doing amazing work, but because it is unregulated and unchallenged at the moment, we need to have those guardrails put in place. So this is why AI ethics is probably the leading movement at this moment, because digital rights are going to be the civil rights movement of this generation, and we're not looking at those things. Privacy has been redefined, keeps being redefined every day because of facial recognition technologies and biometric technologies and what the police are able to do with that. That's something for us to think about. The ability to associate, to gather, these things are being undermined. So there's so much happening with these algorithms that are misbehaving and rewriting the ways in which we administer justice and the ways in which we deliver healthcare and the ways in which we do so many of the things we are doing. But because so few of us are paying attention to what's going on, we are finding that we need to really mobilize this ethical movement to bring big tech and other users and developers of the technology into an ethical space where it can be controlled.
right. And I mean, so it is one of the most pressing issues going forward, right now, current and going forward. Um, I want, I really want you to share with those who may be looking on, professionals who share the concern about this issue, and how it is being used. What advice can you give those professionals who may be in other fields? They could be lawyers, doctors, executives in companies, in house, all of that, different types of professionals, designers, planners. Um, how can they transition into this field? What advice would you give them if they wanted to start to integrate some of this issue of AI ethics into what they do?
Well, certainly, every industry at the moment has been impacted by AI. AI is what we are using to build progress in just about every field, every discipline. It's about development. So you've got to understand the industry that you're in, and you've got to understand how technology is moving that industry forward and what is your role in it. I always say to individuals, it's not about fear, it's about being aware, and it's about building the understanding that is required. So if it is that you're in a leadership position and you are in the C-suite, you must understand what is happening within your organization if you are going to adopt certain digital systems, and what are the ethical implications of those systems. So what is required from a C-suite level would be understanding the risks of the technology, being able to detect and to monitor and to manage those risks, and to be able to evaluate and audit your systems, your algorithmic systems, and ensure that you improve those systems, to understand the kinds of harms that could be created by these systems, and to really bring an awareness that says you are an ethical, emerging technological agency, organization, or any kind of association. If this is something that you are passionate about, and you should be passionate about, because if you are living in 2021, you need to understand the relationship between data and society. It's just that basic. And if you are working in any industry, data is what is moving that industry forward, because that's what you're going to build your business model on, the data that you get. So one of the things that you've got to encourage is intellectual confrontation, the conversations about the technology, the adoption of the technology, the deployment of the technology, the development of the technology, and constantly being vigilant and diligent about how these technologies you are designing, using, adopting, or applying could impact things like duty of care and due process. So you've got to keep thinking about it. I think now there are so many courses available. I also offer a course on Coursera with a team of AI experts that look at what it means to be an ethical emerging technologist, that looks at every aspect of data science and AI ethics and how do you build these ethical organizational cultures. But it's about consciousness, and it's about vigilance, and it's about building the ethical resilience that is required to continue moving forward with the technology.
Thanks, Renee. We do have a couple of questions I want to get to because I see we're going up, getting there in time. One, we have a question around the data and how we get access to the data from one of our persons in Zoom. How can that can work there? How can we advocate for access to these vast data sets held about us when we're not big biz or academics and don't have the funds to buy licenses intentionally priced to make them inaccessible for us as meager independents?
Well, definitely excellent question. I think some individuals are attaching themselves to nonprofits that are actually doing this. There's always the freedom of information. You can go through that regard, but also the ability sometimes when you're using a technology or using a system or a program to really read the user agreement, something that we don't do. Most of us just click yes right through the end so we can access the technology. But much of it is knowing that you have an ability to opt out of the technology, demanding that many of these organizations and companies that are creating the technologies have a responsibility to tell you and to disclose what the technology can do as well as what it cannot do. And understand that you have the ability to email any organization and to really ask them what you want to ask them. They may not answer, but then again, you always find there are advocacy groups working to get that information. So it's really about being vigilant, but it's also about tracking your own behavior in social media and looking at the things that you put out there, looking at the things that you're doing, and just being conscious and understanding that, you know, privacy as we know it has come to an end, and you really have to pay attention about how you protect yourself. So, you know, create some protections for yourself and just become knowledgeable. And of course, you can use Google in other ways, which is to get information about how to protect yourself as well. So it's really, again, about due diligence and building the kind of vigilance that is required moving forward.
And you know, you say that, and it reminds me of something that happened between us maybe 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. So it seems that there is this common, you've always had this sense of data and social media, because I remember I had posted something, I was about my son in a mom's group. There was a mom's group and you were part of it. And I posted something about my son maybe 10, 15 years ago. And you came to me privately and said, Margaret, I don't think you should post that about your son. I don't know if you remember that openly.
No, I don't remember it, but I
Yeah,
hope I gave you good advice.
yeah, you did, you did. And it shows that you've always had this sort of vigilance around the protection and privacy of data of yourself and your family and that sort of thing. So I'm seeing another question coming here. Unfortunately, or a statement, let's just say, in one of our groups, so we don't get their name. Unfortunately, we all live in a society that has very little respect for data and statistics. How does a society change its mindset to appreciate the integral part that data plays? That's even before going into AI and its role in a company's business model.
Well, I would say that I would disagree with that. We live in a society that has great respect for data and statistics. Hence, the reason you have organizations like Facebook that are now major power players on the international scene. It is because they recognize the power of data. And the biggest thing that is being bought right now is data for our elections, our politics, decision making, any kind of information, healthcare. It is all about the data. So there is a great respect now for data. Hence the reason you'd find big companies like Amazon now involved in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So you have to be paying attention to what is going on. So there is a great respect. What is happening is that the average person may not understand the power of their data. So it gives the other data players and data brokers the opportunity to oftentimes monetize that and to often do things with our data that we don't know would be happening.
And this question here, what do you think of the GPT-3? And do we need AI to actually form regulation around algorithms?
You know, I always prefer not to discuss things so specifically. One, I'm not a data scientist. Two, my views are often, around more the impact of data on society and not looking at specifically systems or models or those types of formation. So I like to talk broadly. Just, I guess that's my own crisis communication background and journalism background coming in there. I always
Yeah,
try to stay, stay clear of
within your
certain things.
lane,
Yeah, all
within
the
your
time,
lane.
all the
All
time.
right. Just before we plug off from this live part, what can people expect in the masterclass coming up at, a little later this afternoon at 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock our time, GMT, sorry. Yeah. What can people expect from this masterclass?
Well, we're going to have a conversation, and that's what this is about, conversations for change. We're going to have a conversation that really asks some critical questions about algorithmic decision making systems and their impact on society. We're going to have some fun exercises that's going to make us think about ways in which we could audit and regulate these systems. And then we are going to look at, I think, facial recognition, which is probably one of the most controversial suite of technologies at the moment that's really informing so many things in so many areas. And I think it's just about conscious raising. That's what I want to do in this masterclass. I just want to build that vigilance. And when people leave the masterclass, they can go into their organizations, institutions, agencies, associations, and raise those similar questions. So it's about future proofing. And that's what we're going to do today.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you, all of you who've been tuning in to get this little snippet before we get into the masterclass. If you would like to join us for the masterclass, there is still time. Go to masterclass.futurelaw.io and come and join us to go get a deeper dive into this topic, and for you to really start also thinking about how you can start integrating this knowledge into the work that you're doing, and how you can become more an effective advocate within your organizations for how your data is, how data and the data of the people who interact with your organization is treated. So thanks, everyone. See those of you in Zoom. Renee and I are coming to join you in Zoom in a few minutes. We see you next time. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Renee.